Welcome back to the dark side.
Thanks.
We're restraining yourself, trying not to say it.
Yeah.
Okay, welcome back to the dark side. We hope you enjoyed part 1 of the Hall Mills murder case. If you're tuning in for the first time, go back and listen to part 1, because, duh, that's how it works.
Mm-hmm.
I am sure the rest of you are dying to know what happens next. So why don't we just dive right in?
Let's just jump right in there, head first.
Head first, let's go!
Go.
But maybe I'll give you just a quick little recap.
Okay.
So choir singer Eleanor Mills and Reverend Edward Hall were having an affair. They were found brutally murdered on county lines, which led to disputes over jurisdiction, a botched investigation. There was an arrest. Clifford Hayes was charged with the murders, but a grand jury voted to drop the charges. Pig Woman had some wild tales to tell, so another grand jury convened to hear the case against Francis, Mustache, and Henry Squared, and how they all got together to murder the adulterous couple, but no charges were laid and people moved on with their lives.
This is a wild case. It is off the walls.
So our story picks up again 4 years later,
Okay.
when the scandalous murder was brought back to life.
Oh.
The husband of Louise Geist, one of the former maids in the Hall home, filed a petition for annulment of his marriage on the grounds that his wife had withheld information of the Hall Hills murder. He claimed in the petition that Louise had told Francis on the day of the murder that Edward intended to elope with Eleanor. He also stated that Louise, Francis, and Mustache were driven out to the Lover's Lane by the chauffeur that evening to confront Edward and Eleanor, and Louise was paid $5,000 for her part in the matter and for keeping quiet.
Okay.
Louise said this whole story was bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
But this new accusation, or whatever you want to call it, brought light to the story again. And people were like, huh, hey, what happened with that? I mean, it has been 4 years. And at this point, there was a new prosecutor in Somerset County, and he heard of this. And he immediately arrested Francis and Mustache and Henry Squared. And they were all charged to stand trial for the murder again.
Yep.
The state's prosecutor succeeded in a motion to try cousin Henry separately, since there was apparently less evidence against him. They all pleaded not guilty to the charge. Mm-hmm. Francis was released on bail until the trial, but the bail was denied for the other men. So, I don't know, probably a symbol of her status and wealth. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or maybe she's a woman. Let's let her out. What is she gonna do?
Yeah, we have to protect her her delicate sensibilities. She's not sensible, guys. Sorry about that.
So the newspapers, they picked up on the story and raced to outdo one another in tabloid sensationalism.
Right from ground, we're starting from ground one again.
Right? It's like I'm telling you the same story.
Yeah, here we go again.
I'm just starting from the beginning.
Get the food carts out ready.
Get your meat sweats on.
Another crab tree to fucking peel.
Crab tree. God, crab apple.
Crab apple tree.
Crab apple tree. As new evidence was being collected for the upcoming trial, Frances invited reporters to her home so that she could sit for a portrait and complained about being made an ogre by the press.
Oh, she's on a PR run right now, isn't she?
Let me sit for this portrait and degrade you all. I am not an ogre.
I'm a real Martha Stewart. Who's that?
House arrest what? House arrest what?
That's wild. She's really framed the narrative for herself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also, if you caught that, yeah, I said new evidence. I said that.
I did catch
new
that.
Evidence.
Yeah.
So in the 4 years that had passed, evidence had disappeared from storage.
Suspicious.
So the autopsy reports, Mustache's gun, the original grand jury testimonies.
Those went missing?
Yeah, they did. The previous Somerset prosecutor, who had been so eager to pin the murder on Clifford Hayes based on Raymond Schneider's false confession, he was like, I don't know, I must have misplaced that very vital evidence. And it turned out that his brother had the grand jury testimony in his possession, and he was caught trying to sell it anonymously to a newspaper.
These tabloids are fucking this town up so hard. They're going nuts.
Also, how did the brother wasn't involved in any way in law enforcement. He was like a pharmacist or a druggist
Yeah, why
or
do you
something.
have that?
Like, what the fuck is going on? What the fuck is going on? It's a fuckery.
It's a goddamn spectacle. Bunch of knuckleheads.
An absolute spectacle. So prior to the start of the trial, both bodies were exhumed again for autopsies.
Oh, no.
Since, the autopsy reports were fucking missing.
Yep. And now the coat's missing.
Who defiled these pockets?
I hope the autopsy guy is just wearing the coat.
Oh, it's a new guy now.
I know, but I hope the old one shows up and goes, what's going on?
What's going on in here? It's like tattered and moth-eaten.
Yeah. Pockets are intact, though.
So this new autopsy technician, he came to the same conclusion that was like originally made. He didn't say that because they didn't have the reports. I'm saying that because I don't really want to go through the whole autopsy again,
Mm-hmm.
But like basically Edward was shot in the head and Eleanor was shot 3 times in the head and her throat was slit.
So the facts are stable on that side.
Yeah, he concluded the same thing. But this time, he found something new in her case. Her tongue and her larynx had been cut out.
They missed that?
Yeah.
Someone's getting paid real well.
Yeah, they missed that.
Someone's getting paid a good amount.
Her tongue and her larynx. The church choir singer, essentially her voice box was removed.
That's so gross.
So creepy. It's kind of a big thing to miss.
Mm-hmm.
Trial began on November 3rd, 1926, at the Somerset County Courthouse in Somerville. The jury was selected in just over an hour, and all members were married men.
Okay, well, of the time, I guess.
I know.
It's not good.
So,
but,
So Ogre, Mustache, and Brother Henry were tried first. Since Cousin Henry won that decision to be tried separately.
Right, yeah. Was Henry the one that was fishing?
Brother Henry was fishing, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Cousin Henry was at that dinner with friends and his wife.
Oh, till 10. Yep, okay. Henry squared.
Henry squared.
Yeah.
So the prosecution opened with the main evidence against the defendant, such as, like Mustache's thumbprint on the calling card found at Edward's foot, the anonymous call that Ogre had made to police asking if they found anyone dead or injured, and how Ogre hired a PI that bribed and supposedly threatened key witnesses.
Oh my God.
So, she's like, well, I just had to know what happened. I hired a PI. Meanwhile, everyone's like, yeah, that guy came up to me and threatened me not to talk. Mm-hmm. So there was over 100 witnesses that testified at this trial. Mm-hmm. So only the relevant witnesses I'm going to talk about. Because, I could sit here and tell you the testimony of 100 witnesses.
Cut through the clutter like you're good at. Yeah. Thank you.
So Charlotte Mills was first.
Mm-hmm.
She's the first one I'm going to talk about. Literally, I have no idea if she was literally the first one on the stand, but that is James and Eleanor's daughter. So she was called to the stand to identify the letters between Eleanor and Edward. She also testified the last time that she had seen her mother was when Eleanor had left the house to make that call to Edward.
Mm-hmm.
Anna Hogue, she's up next. She lived near the crime scene and had heard 4 shots on the night of the murders. She claimed that Brother Henry had come to her house sometime after the murders and asked about a quote-unquote tragedy that had taken place nearby, and this frightened her. She watched him walk away in an agitated state, nearly collapsing when he passed the spot where the bodies were found.
Okay.
The defense challenged Anna and got her to admit she didn't know Brother Henry very well, and she hadn't seen him in a long time.
Okay, so full of shit.
We got Ralph Goslin. He's a vestryman at St. John's.
Okay.
I think he's just part of the clergy. I don't know what a vestryman is.
Yeah.
So he testified that he once had an affair with Eleanor. He admitted he had been near Durussey's Lane that night of the murders around 10:20 p.m. with another woman from the church choir. And they had heard a shot, they heard a woman scream, and then they heard 3 more shots. He added that Brother Henry saw him and fired 2 warning shots into the ground to scare him away.
Uh-huh.
But this contradicted the many witnesses who heard only 4 shots that night, but the woman he was with that night took the stand as well and gave the same story.
Not a stretch to imagine that she would.
Fair.
Yeah.
So then 3 fingerprint experts testified that Mustache's left index fingerprint was on the calling card found at the scene. But the third and quote-unquote most impressive expert was interrupted by news of a sudden declining state of the pig woman.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Hello, pig woman.
My favorite of the case.
So her doctor had just like fucking rushed into the courtroom and said her rising temperature and blood pressure would make any courtroom appearances detrimental to her health. And the judges were like, yeah, no, we gotta see this for ourselves. So they just stopped the trial and they went to the hospital. And one of the judges was like, well, she doesn't seem to be at death's door. So they resumed and waited further developments on her state.
The judges were just enamored with her as we are.
She doesn't seem to be at death's door. Get her in there.
Yeah, she's okay. Doctor, I would know. I'm a judge.
I come bearing news of the pig woman.
He rehearsed how he was going to come in there.
I picture the doors of the courtroom closed and he's outside just like talking to himself, pulling on his collar like, okay, just do it. Okay, we'll go.
I object. Wait, oh, fuck, sorry. That's weddings. Anyway, you gotta stop. Pig woman's sick.
Pig woman. She's ailing.
She's ailing.
So the judges were like, no, she's fine. She's not at death's door. Get her ass in here. So then they started the trial again. And the first person to come up when they resumed was James Mills, Eleanor's husband. He was called as the next witness. He discussed his movements on the evening and the night of the murders, and the defense's strategy was to make it appear that he was the murderer by mentioning how he didn't reach out to his missing wife's relatives when she didn't come home. He didn't see if she was at a local hospital. He didn't check in with police stations, nothing.
Because this guy chose happiness. He knew something was going on and he was just turning. It's like, yeah, no, he was just like, you know what? No, I don't want to know.
Well, he said, Eleanor did sometimes leave for like a day or 2 at a time without saying where she was going, so I just didn't think anything of it.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's got the most lock solid alibi so far.
Well, yeah, even think about it when he gave his whole, like, when the investigators finally had to cooperate because the governor was like, get your shit together.
Yeah.
He was like, yeah, here's everything I know, except I'm not going to admit that they were having an affair. And the investigators were like, yeah, okay, this guy, he's not really all there, but, like, he's fine. He just likes to do a lot of woodworking.
Yeah, he likes to do some busy work to not think of other things going on, yeah.
So next up, they brought in a woman named Anna Behrman. She testified that she had seen the coat that Ogre sent out to be dyed, and there was no spots or stains on it, removing the suspicion that it was dyed to cover blood stains. Ogre later testified that she didn't even wear that coat on the night of the murders, and that she only sent it out to get dyed because she wanted a black coat to wear to her husband's funeral.
Okay.
When people had been like, I saw her wearing that coat on the night of the murders, and she definitely got it sent out to hide blood stains.
I'm so sick of this town.
This town is the worst.
Well, township.
Whatever, all of it.
Yeah, they're like the Salem witch trials fucking people all over again.
Did that involve the church? Henry Dickman was next, causing a quote-unquote flurry of anticipation since he had disappeared in the years after being part of the case. So he described how he had interviewed Brother Henry in early 1923, who was evasive when questioned. He added that he left the state because he had been paid $25. $25?
This is an easy buy.
He had been paid $2,500 by Beekman. That was one of the previous prosecutors. He contradicted himself later when he said that Brother Henry was actually the one that paid him, but Beekman was there. He was there, though.
Okay.
His testimony was not received well because on the stand he was proven to be a deserter and a drunk.
Oh, God. They're so catty.
It's so great.
Deserter and a drunk.
It's like a soap opera. So in the meantime, Pig Woman, well, she was still ailing, right? So the defense had her moved to a hospital in Jersey City to be assessed by different doctors, and they were told that she wasn't dying, she was just unhealthy. And Pig Woman's mother, meantime, she's in the courtroom, and she's just undermining her daughter's credibility to anyone who would listen, saying that her daughter's name wasn't even Jane, and that she lied about everything, so don't even believe her.
I mean, yeah.
Her own mother.
Yeah, her own mother's not even in her own corner.
Nope. So then they got another guy up on the stand. His name's Robert Erling, and he testified that he was at Lover's Lane that night with a girl named Jenny Lemford, and he saw the Pig Woman on Easton Avenue. He also claimed to have seen a sedan and a touring car. The defense produced a friend of his, Willie Staub, Staub, S-T-A-U-B.
Stop.
Whatever, Willie. Another Willie.
Yeah.
Another Willie. Okay?
Yeah, great.
The defense produced a friend of his, Willie, who claimed that Robert had told him he'd get money for saying that he saw him that night. Then they produced Jenny Lemford, the girl who was actually with Robert that night, and she denied everything about his story except the fact that they were at Lover's Lane.
Okay. That's weird.
It's just these people.
This lane is super popular, though.
It's a Lover's Lane.
Yeah.
So the main piece of physical evidence, that calling card with the fingerprint, it came under fire. Experts on both sides could conclusively argue in favor or against the print belonging to Mustache.
Mm-hmm.
So there was also the fact that the card had been exposed to the elements for like roughly 36 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And it had been passed around by nosy Nellies.
Literally fucking
everybody. And was
everybody.
never carefully handled as evidence. So like, this card pretty much means nothing. Like, it really does. It means nothing.
Yeah, when they were talking about that, I was like, what good is that? It's literally been tampered with.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Otto Schultz, he was the one that performed that latest autopsy, and he told them about how Eleanor's tongue and larynx had been cut out. And then he also mentioned that there was a cut in her abdomen, and 2 undertakers later admitted to opening her womb to see if she was pregnant. One did this, and then he reported on it. Like, y'all opened up her womb to see if she was pregnant. She wasn't. And then the other one was like, I gotta check this out for myself. So he reopened the incision to see if she was pregnant or not. Literally with no authority to do so. No one asked them to do this. There was no speculation that she was pregnant. They just abused her dead body.
So, like, no relevance to the case whatsoever. They just wanted to see if this manufactured idea that they had in their head that she was pregnant could have affected the circumstance. Okay.
So I think that's why Dr. Otto Schultz mentioned it, being like, yo, I don't fucking know what kind of people you had before this, but they're obsessed with pockets and wombs.
He must have been I feel like he's the only one with like a head on his shoulders, and he must have just been so weirded out.
He probably was. He's in Twin Peaks at this point.
Yeah, like how do you miss a tongue being cut out?
Or the larynx.
And the larynx.
Like, the whole voice box is missing. I don't know, it's a slash.
That's quite easy to notice.
Maybe it was still full of maggots. I don't know.
I feel like they cleaned that up.
You think this town does due diligence, huh? Huh?
The maggots did.
Ew. So then they brought a milkman forward that claimed that he had found the back door to the Hull house open on Friday morning. Literally no idea. I just like to imagine that the milkman was up there and he still had all of his gear on. He just brought milk to everyone. Also, why was he at the back door? Is there a sign that said milkman go around back?
Maybe.
So then there was a delivery boy that said that Mustache had given him a stained suit on Friday to be dry cleaned, and he turned the clothing over to the police because he was like, yo, this looks suspicious. It has spots on it. Mm-hmm. But no one knows what happened to the suit. It was never cataloged or inventoried in any sort of way, and it's just missing. Oh, but maybe Mustache was a messy eater. I don't know. We don't know what these spots or stains were.
Yeah, and the gun missing too. It's just coincidence.
Oh yeah, that gun.
A pesky murder weapon.
Okay, but then the pig woman, she was brought in on a stretcher as the prosecution's star witness. And the whole time that she was being wheeled in, her mother was like screaming about how much of a liar she was.
Yeah.
So the defense seated her mother in the front row to see if it would rattle her daughter.
Of course. Classic.
Then, Pig Woman, she told her story, omitting and changing certain details and adding how Francis's PIs had warned her to keep her mouth shut. Just normal Pig Woman stuff.
Yeah. The PI telling people to keep their mouths shut does seem like it's a recurring theme, though.
Absolutely, but,
Pig
small
woman.
town, people talk.
Yeah,
and it's Pig Woman.
Yeah.
So that was
I told my mule to shut up.
The mule's just sitting there like, I didn't ask for this.
My name's not Jenny.
It's Gerald.
Gerald? Gerald Mule, no relation.
So now it was the defense's turn, and they presented enough witnesses to make Brother Henry's alibi credible. He's the one who was fishing.
Mm-hmm.
And it appeared that he'd only been named as a suspect because the prosecution 4 years earlier had decided that it would require an expert marksman to shoot the victims. And since Pig Woman had heard the name Henry being yelled, and Brother Henry was a marksman and a relative, he had been dragged into the messy case.
That's so unfortunate.
And it was later learned that relatives called Brother Henry Harry. So
it makes no
Ogre
sense.
wouldn't have yelled Henry when addressing him unless cousin Henry was there.
Yeah.
In which case is irrelevant right now because he isn't on trial yet.
Yeah.
So 2 witnesses, a mother and a daughter, also insisted that he was not the man who had stopped by Anna Hoag's house and asked about the murders. The one who was like, I don't know, he came to my house, I was really frightened, and then he nearly collapsed when he passed that spot where the bodies were found. And they were like, ma'am. And she was like, okay, fine, I don't even know him, really. That lady.
Yeah.
So with Brother Henry pretty much cleared, Mustache was next. And he surprised the audience by holding his own with the prosecutor and staying true to his story. Because, at this point, everyone is like, oh, he's so special.
Yeah.
But they were like, oh my God, he can actually handle himself? Weird.
He's been faking it this whole time.
Is that mustache even real?
It's not.
Pulls it off. Takes off his thick glasses, puts a monocle on.
It's me, the governor, this whole time.
You've been punked.
Christ.
So it came out that the first time Pig Woman was asked to identify the defendants, she was unable to. When a farmer, George Sipple, claimed that Pig Woman had offered him money to say that he had seen her and the 2 men and 2 women that night on Duressy's Lane. So immediately discrediting it. She had in all her crazy stories was like, oh, I seen them. I really did. I saw that gray coat. I saw the ogre whining over her husband's dead body. That car rode up, and they eliminated them. Like, I saw them. I know who they are. So then when they're like, hey, will you point out the defendants, please?
Couldn't even do it.
She couldn't do it. So it was Ogre's turn now to take the stand, and the prosecution went after her for the statements she had made to James Mills that she believed the 2 missing spouses were dead. She responded that at the time it seemed obvious that they were dead when they didn't return home.
Did it? Right to dead?
Oh, okay, so they're not home yet? Dead. They're dead. They're dead. Obviously, they're dead, and I should tell everyone that they're probably dead.
Yep.
Because they were dead.
She took a hard line with it. Mm-hmm. Immediately to dead, rotting in the ground somewhere. Probably by a crab apple tree.
When the defense eventually rested, in total there had been 157 people called to the stand. 87 for the prosecution and 70 for the defense. So you remember Pearl and Raymond, those 2 people who discovered the bodies, and Raymond had lied and said that his friend killed them?
Mm-hmm.
They were never even called as witnesses.
Really?
Out of 157 people, they weren't even called.
All those people. Wow.
And so the trial, it lasted like 30 days. It lasted 30 days. The prosecution moved for a mistrial on the grounds of jury misconduct, alleging that they hadn't even paid attention and they were openly hostile. And the judges were like, shut up. And he was like, okay, I'll just give my closing remarks then.
Yeah. The judge is so done with this.
I think there was like 3 judges, 2 or 3 judges. So the jury deliberated for 5 hours and 8 minutes. In that time, they took 3 separate votes before they reached a verdict. But the first vote was 10-2 for not guilty. 10 not guilty, 2 guilty. Then they took another vote, and it was 11-1 One person still thought they were guilty. And then they took another vote. And then it was unanimous. Not guilty.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So they decided to acquit all 3 defendants. The main reasons for acquittal was that no one had believed the star witness. Pigwoman's story was inconsistent, and rebuttal witnesses easily dismantled it. The only thing that they had been torn on was the fingerprint evidence. But it ultimately,
that's what hung them up on that one.
Yeah, at this point, what else did they have?
Oh my god!
So that was the only thing that they were like, I don't know, I don't really know. And then they finally were like, you know what? No, there's not enough. Not guilty.
Is it normal for them to vote 3 times?
I mean, it's 1922, and we're in this fucking weird ass town. Is anything normal? So all charges were dismissed, and everyone was released from custody. And even if Ogre, Mustache, and Brother Henry had the motive and the means for the murders, there wasn't even enough at all to convict them. So that was it. It was done. They weren't on trial anymore.
This case is fucking ridiculous, and everyone in the town pisses me off so badly. Everyone
sucks ass. Huge fucking ass.
Stop reading the judge's closing remarks, okay?
Y'all suck ass. Court dismissed. So eventually, Ogre, Mustache, and Henry Squared, they all sued the New York Daily Mirror for libel. But it was settled out of court, so we don't know how much money they made. But apparently it was an undisclosed large amount. Because they needed more money.
Yeah.
And no one else was ever accused of the crimes. The New York Times devoted about 90 front-page articles to the trial.
Wow.
The case was so high profile, it took the cake for sensationalism until 10 years later when Baby Lindbergh was kidnapped.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, so it reigned supreme until Baby Lindbergh.
Oh, God. 90 in the New York Times is the front cover. A1. Oh, my God.
So even though the murders are still unsolved to this day, there's like a ton of theories as to who murdered Edward and Eleanor. The first one is that Raymond Schneider and Clifford Hayes really did commit the murders in a case of mistaken identity. So he thought Eleanor and Edward were his girlfriend Pearl and her father, and they were all up in arms because of like the supposed incest angle. And people think like, well, maybe that really is a possibility, but like it's obvious that Edward and Eleanor were killed at close range.
Yeah.
So like how like the chance of mistaken identity seems so small, because by the time you actually got up on them and they were killed close range, the post-mortem mutilation of her neck and everything, like how...
Yeah, it's way too personal.
Yeah.
And there's no way you wouldn't recognize, even if it's dark, like you're right up on that person. You would notice like, oh, this is not who I thought it was.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So like personally, I'm out on that one. I don't think that it was Raymond and Clifford that did it.
Yeah, it's a no for me too, dog.
The next theory is that like Ogre did it by herself out of revenge. She was the only person that night watchman saw go into her house at like around 2:30 a.m. And like it is always important to remember that the time of death that undertaker gave is really only approximate. It's an estimate. It isn't like definitive by any means, but he did see her go into the house at 2:30 a.m. where she had said that she left at 2:30 a.m. And then, you know, witnesses saw that car in the area of the crime scene that is like one that she owned. And then she did anonymously call the police. And she was asking like, oh, you know, did you find anything?
Yeah, which is super sketchy.
And then she had asked James, like, so have you heard anything? What do you think? I think they're dead. And then she had hired that PI to go and like investigate.
Yeah.
But people were like, no, that guy wasn't investigating shit. He was just here to like shake us down and bribe us or threaten us. So like, I think that's a pretty good theory.
Yeah.
The other one is that she didn't do it by herself out of revenge. She got Mustache to do it with her, and he is the one that shot them because he had that 32 caliber pistol.
Yeah.
And he helped pose the bodies and mutilate Eleanor's neck. There was that person that testified saying that he sent his clothes in to be dry cleaned the following day, and they were handed over to police because they had like suspicious stains on them. But then the suit was lost and never examined, so like we don't even know what became of that.
Yeah.
And he was agitated the next morning when the maid said that he was like making comments about how like they were up all night and there was trouble and people would hear about it soon. And then the fact that Mustache and Ogre's alibi is each other.
Yep.
So that adds to it.
Yep.
Obviously, the next suspect then is James Mills. So he did it because he knew his wife was unfaithful and she had challenged him on that night to go and follow her. When he was like, so where are you going? And she was like, follow me and find out.
Yeah.
And he was like, I'm just going to do my woodworking, which people did say like, yeah, he was out there for a long time. We heard him. We saw him.
Yeah, his story seems really corroborated to me.
The only thing that's weird for him that people like speculate on is the fact that he did leave a couple times in the night, twice, 2 separate times.
Yeah.
And just because he did have that person, wherever he went to get a soda on his way, they're like, yeah, I came in here and bought a soda. But it's like, that's nice. He could just have said he was out getting a soda.
If he's like, okay, you know, my wife hasn't come home and like, you know, where is she? And he went out supposedly honestly and stuff, and then he picked up a drink. Like, that's totally reasonable.
Yeah.
The only thing that's eating away at me is 2:00 in the morning.
Yeah.
And Francis, 2:00 ish in the morning. But the corroboration between like everyone that like, if we're looking at all the different angles of this and all the theories, like he has the more rock solid alibi in my opinion.
Yeah.
You know, next to the guy who was fishing. Which, you know, like that poor bastard was just
50
dragged
miles
into this.
away.
Yeah. But the one thing is, sorry, do you have more theories? Okay. All right. I'm going to drop what I think.
Okay.
Afterwards.
So another theory is that the vestryman Ralph, he did it. He's the one that had admitted to being near the crime scene that night with that other woman from the church. And he did it out of jealousy since, you know, he had an affair with Eleanor at one point, and then he was near the crime scene and the woman he was with helped because she was a jealous rival of Eleanor's and equally wanted the minister's attention, the reverend minister. I don't even know if those are the same thing. Edwards.
Yeah, I have no idea either.
She equally wanted Edward's attention, and like she was known to have often spied on Edward and Eleanor. And like there was all that gossip at the church that like members were jealous of Eleanor because of her status in the choir. And then how Eleanor's throat was slashed and her tongue and her larynx was removed. Like your larynx is essentially your voice box.
In 1920s Mean Girls.
I know, right?
Yeah.
So like that's a pretty interesting, good theory, you know. You can see how that makes sense. It could have been someone else entirely from the church that did it. There was like so many people in the choir who hated Eleanor for being favored by Edward, and this theory still sort of like holds weight when you think about how her neck was completely destroyed.
Yeah.
And then there's theories that people are like, oh, maybe the pig woman did it because like she came forward as a witness instead to insert herself into the investigation. To like take suspicion away from her, like, well, I did it, so how about I just insert myself to get like, you know, the down low. See where
I thought the
are
same
headed.
thing for a minute, but it took me a very long time to get there because I got to be honest, for more than 10 minutes of having already heard about the entire story with Pig Woman, I was just enamored by how absurd she was that it didn't even cross my mind for a millisecond that, hey, like maybe you should consider her a suspect.
It makes sense to consider her, especially because she came out of nowhere and was like, hey, look what's going on. I want to be a part of this. And then like she looks guilty because she had given so many, like there was inconsistencies in her stories and all her stories were different. And the only thing that people were like, well, I mean, sure, she looks guilty, but like just because you're a fucking weirdo doesn't mean you did it. And like she had no motive. She didn't own a pistol or any guns, and like she had no awareness of like even who those people were. So
yeah, and it also makes no sense to me. Like initially I was like, well, could have mistaken them for the fucking corn thief who's been just wreaking havoc on her life, obviously. Yeah. But it doesn't account for the way that they were murdered, which
exactly.
one is certainly execution style. The shot from above, right above his eye, screams execution style to me.
Yeah.
Even though it may not be. I mean, I'm not.
Just the fact that it means that someone was above him. So no matter what, it was obviously a power stance. Of
but then
get on your knees or something.
Yeah, that's what I imagined. I mean, sure, it could have been like a sniper from the trees, but like, guys, really, you think this is Nom? Like, no, it's 1920.
I know it was a pistol.
Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah.
Caliber.
Well, you could snipe with a pistol.
Oh yeah, right.
You haven't played COD before?
The guy, his alibi was clear. The expert marksman.
Yeah.
He was 50 miles away fishing.
50 miles away is a hell of a shot, isn't it?
True.
Yeah. But it doesn't
hot take.
Yeah. You got to arc the bullet, right? You're pretty much lobbing it up there. But it doesn't account for the way the woman was killed at all. 3 bullets to the head, and then cutting out the tongue and the larynx.
And just straight up slashing.
Yeah, that's a passion crime.
It's full of hatred. It's like, yeah, it's passionate.
And
it's
if there's
passionate.
someone who can bring the drama, we know it's Pig Woman, but I don't think it's that kind of drama.
I agree with you. Another theory is that it was just someone random that robbed them. But again, it doesn't take into account how targeted, personal...
like, got your tongue.
Yeah.
Like...
Yeah, like... You would just rob them then, and if you had to shoot them for whatever reason, because it ended up being a case of like, well, they could identify me, so I have to shoot them. Then you would just shoot them dead and run away. You wouldn't pose them and fuck up Eleanor's neck.
Yeah, leave that calling card there, and no.
And then, of course, the theory of like a random killer did it. So it's like some sicko was like passing through the area. Maybe he's got a fetish for voice boxes.
Oh.
He cuts it out. Which I mean, it's unsolved, right? Like any of them could be possible, but I think
no one can tell, Brianna. No one could tell. Get it? Because they don't have a voice box anymore.
And they're dead.
And they're dead.
And it was 100 years ago. All right, so those are the like. There's like a million theories. There's like fucking stupid ones, but like the Ku Klux Klan and stuff. But I'm not even going to get into that.
Okay.
So like, what do you think? You heard what I had to say there. Just those are like the widely popular ones. So like, let's get your hot takes.
All right, my hot take. I think Frances had a lot more to do with this. I don't know if she pulled the trigger, and I kind of don't think she did. But I think she paid someone to. Mm-hmm. My main reason is she's the family that came from all that money. And also, if that car was there, right? Everyone seems to be coming back to saying that car was there. Her car was there.
Mm-hmm. And multiple people saw it.
Yeah, and the other thing...
Or a car like it.
Yeah, a car like it, yeah. And the other thing, too, is... why all this evidence started disappearing, and that's not a one-person job anymore, and it certainly isn't William. I don't think maybe William is involved, but like the scope of evidence starting to disappear that is critical to this case and implicating Frances specifically makes me think that like, hey, how hard was it to bribe this county? Especially when it was so dysfunctional.
It was so dysfunctional.
Like, why were I'm still blown away that the cops couldn't decide on jurisdiction for so long.
I know, it was like a cringy custody battle.
Yeah, that a goddamn circus essentially erected around this crime scene, tampered everything until the governor got involved, which is 2 weeks later. So I honestly think that there's an angle there where Frances paid some people.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree. Do you have anything else to add?
No.
Okay, so I'm with you 100%, but I even think I think I know who she paid and why she was also in the area.
Oh, really?
So I really do believe that it was with that Ralph guy that had an affair with Eleanor. And how he brought that woman with him from the church as well, and they were on Lover's Lane. And they both were like, yeah, like the vestryman or whatever he was.
Mm-hmm.
They were both like, yeah, we were in the area, but like that's it, you know, like.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Francis, so Ogre, paid, or at least in some capacity, got Ralph to kill them because he was still into Eleanor. It's clear they used to have an affair together.
Mm-hmm.
The woman that was with him was also part of the church. She was jealous of Eleanor. She wanted the attention of the Reverend.
Yeah.
Frances, I think, was in the area. The people saw like that big fancy car. She probably went there to make sure that the job was going to get done, or direct otherwise with like the posing, how to mutilate Eleanor's body, especially because Eleanor, she was so like the wounds and everything were obviously way worse than Edward. But one thing that has always stood out to me is that his hat covered his face. And that's like a notorious thing that if you've murdered someone you know or have a connection with or whatever, you cover their body or their face out of like, whether it's a subconscious thought or not, out of respect, you know, or because you don't want them to see you or look at you or anything, so you cover their face.
Yeah.
And she was posed more provocatively with like her hand resting on his leg, and he had his arm out and her head was resting on his arm, but his face was covered.
Yeah.
And that to me suggests like a more personal connection to Edward.
Yeah.
And plus he was only shot once, not only shot once, but you know, in comparison, he was shot once in the head and that was that. Eleanor was shot 3 times and her throat was fucked up.
Yeah, not to mention that like the romantic posing, like obviously he brought the romance into play on this, like their relationship,
and having the love letters torn up and scattered.
Yeah, it's very send a message kind of killing.
So I think that Frances absolutely had a hand in it. I agree. I don't think she pulled the trigger herself. I think that she didn't have to. I think she had money, status, power, influence, whatever. Manipulated Ralph and that woman. I don't know what her name is. It's just always, she's just referred to as like the woman that Ralph was with. They all were at the church. They're all part of the church. Frances was always there. Everyone in this town is clearly loves gossip, knows everything about everyone. Frances was probably sick of it. She's probably sick of like it being so widely known that like her husband was seeing Eleanor. It would probably bothered her even more so that in like Frances's mind she was like more, maybe had like loose morals because she also was had an affair with that Ralph guy. Who knows who else she had messed around with in the church. I think Frances was sick of it. And I think that she got Ralph to help take out her husband and Eleanor. And she went there and she was more of a role of like, okay, great, I'm happy you did it. Now pose the bodies. Now get rid of the gun. Here's the story and whatever. And she hired that PI to, for sure, threaten witnesses or bribe them with money and stuff like that.
Yeah, 100%. And so quickly. Like right away.
Immediately. I think it was like, I don't even know if it was before the funeral, but it was like immediately. So that's what I think. It's because I can't get over the mutilation of her throat and her neck and everything. And how like all people like say about her in like positive ways is like she was such a lovely, beautiful singer and like she was always in the church and she loved the choir, whatever. So it's like if that is her like what she's known as, her staple, what people attribute to her name, it's like a pretty powerful message to remove someone's voice box.
Yeah, it's like something like a mob hit would do. It would contain.
Send in the way of like sending a message.
Yeah.
I do think it's funny to think that it could have been like a random killer that just really liked voice boxes and he was in the area, but I don't think so.
Who's this wonderful singer I keep hearing about?
I know. And I don't think that it was James. And I think Willie maybe like Mustache. I think he probably knew about it or heard something or I think that he knew about it, at least, especially when Frances finally came home, because there was witnesses that said the lights were on in the house all night. And, or maybe if he didn't know exactly what happened, he isn't like a total idiot. So Frances came home in the middle of the night, and Willie was probably like, what were you doing? Where were you? Whatever. He could probably tell, like, something probably happened. Like, where were you? Whatever. Like,
yeah, she was going around to literally everyone in the town.
I know.
Like, hyping up that something's happened. She went to James. I almost said Frances went to Francis. She went to James and was like, I think they're dead.
I know.
I think they're dead. And, like, you say that to your son, who seems a bit, like slower,
Her brother.
guess, or her brother, sorry. And seems a bit slower.
Pig woman is the one with the son. With a son husband.
Yep. Sorry. I'm doing okay for keeping track.
Yeah.
Considering.
You're good.
But like, she hyped him up for sure. Just keep saying that over and over, and he's just like, oh shit,
for
something's
sure.
going down.
Plus,
like,
what if he heard that call, that anonymous call she made? Maybe he overheard that call of her being like, oh, so have you found anything suspicious? Anyone injured? Anyone dead? Maybe Willie heard that and was like, what the fuck is she on? And then the maid sees him like an hour or whatever the fuck later, and it's like, Willie, what's wrong with you? And he's like, something terrible must have happened. Like, I've been up all night, but like, you know.
Yeah, and he didn't elaborate.
No,
Like,
and he wouldn't elaborate because he probably didn't have anything else to say. So I don't think that he knew any sort of details. I don't think he's an idiot. I think he could tell something was off or weird. And like you said, she's out there hyping everyone up, saying, well, they're probably dead. They're probably dead.
Yeah.
I bet they're dead. Hey, did you hear? They're dead.
Yeah.
So that's what I think.
Yeah.
And that's what you think.
I
think we've solved it, you know?
Yeah, case closed, guys. You're welcome.
Stamp.
Yeah. I'll see you on this hour of 60 Minutes or whatever the fuck show we get to go on.
We're on our own show.
Oh, yeah. I'll see you next week.
You guys should let us know what you think. Obviously, there will be posts on social media. Just comment. Be like, hey, I agree, or you're dumb. That's not the theory at all.
Now, let me tell you why you're wrong.
What happened. It was Pig Woman. Because duh.
Okay, honestly, guys, if you have a theory as to, like, that justifies Pig Woman being considered the prime suspect, I want to hear that.
Come at us with good theories. Don't be like, it was a ghoul.
Yeah, hit us with a dissertation,
It was
please.
a goat man. He always kills people in lovers' lanes.
Okay, don't send it to Brianna, but you can throw that my way. It's okay.
In his 1931 essay, Echoes of the Jazz Age, Fitzgerald described 1922 as an age of miracles. It was an age of art. It was an age of excess, and it was an age of satire. This offers a partial explanation as to why he set The Great Gatsby in 1922 when it was published in 1925. So, at the beginning of part 1, I mentioned that it's widely believed that this case inspired F. Scott Fitzgerald when he was writing The Great Gatsby. So, The Great Gatsby was inspired by the Fitzgeralds' 18 months in Great Neck, New York, beginning in late 1922. And they arrived in Great Neck the day after the story broke that Eleanor Mills and Edward Hall were murdered. And, I mean, at this point, scandalous headlines were impossible to miss. Plus, it's known that the Fitzgeralds did follow the case. There was, like, a scrapbook dedicated to it. And, like, people, you know, scholars and literary critics and all of that are like, oh, well, this is absolutely an inspiration for F. Scott Fitzgerald. He 100% used this story.
Oh, you know what I call those people? The pish-posh.
The pish-posh. So,
people with sticks up their ass. Where I know where they found the stick now, though.
crab apple tree.
Crab apple tree.
So, I was thinking about it, and I mean, I can see some similarities, I guess, to this case and to The Great Gatsby. So the one that, like, initially, while I was researching and everything, I was like, okay, well, this one I can see for sure. So Tom Buchanan is Daisy's husband. He's wealthy and he's handsome, and he's having a pretty obvious affair with Myrtle Wilson, who is unsatisfied with her marriage to George, and she craves finer things and attention, and they live in a crappy house and have no money, and George is portrayed as simple.
Yeah.
And then there's Edward Hall. So in real life, the case, Edward Hall, he's apparently handsome. People thought he was. No, thank you, but people did. And he was wealthy. He was having an obvious affair with Eleanor Mills, who is unsatisfied with her marriage to James and craves romance and a better life. And they live in a crappy house and have little money. And James was described as being simple. So that...
Other than the simple thing, though, like, that's a fairly common archetype.
So the other significance that I could draw is the car. So Gatsby's car that murders Myrtle in the book is obviously a huge point to discuss. Literally, Myrtle's husband is obsessed with that car and figuring out who drove it so that he can find them and take vengeance for murdering his wife. And in the Hall Mills case, there was the supposed touring car that kept coming up as to, like, whose car was this? It was near the scene. We have to figure out whose car this was.
That very luxurious car with, like, supposedly a chauffeur.
Yeah, so I thought about that too. And, like, I don't know. I don't really know what else.
Yeah, I think the class level,
just,
like
the
you've
classes,
mentioned,
the affairs, but, like, Fitzgerald, he was, like, always influenced by his real life. He had a volatile marriage. He wrote about Zelda's breakdowns, the rise and fall of their fortune, their parties, their friends, the quirky people they met, everything.
The love affair that Zelda had with someone else as well.
Yeah, so, like, it wouldn't even be surprising if he did get a little bit of inspiration from this case, especially if he was living in the area, especially, like, the scandalous affair part, which is an entire plot point in Gatsby. So, like, sure, maybe he did get a little bit of inspiration, but I think it's, like, hard to say for sure, definitively, like, put it on the Wikipedia page like it is that this was inspired by it.
Yeah, I have a lot of trouble with that.
Me too.
Like, a lot. Like, because, like, why did you pick that over his life? Like, why did you pick this case where that entire situation where there's this other guy that's having an affair with someone in a lower class? That's in Fitzgerald's own life already. Zelda was already seeing someone else. And so did Fitzgerald do the same. They did it out of spite to each other. Yep. They destroyed each other.
Exactly. Their volatile marriage.
So as much as someone can say, like, look at the similarities between this case and Gatsby, I would say, okay, look at the similarities between the author himself, his life with his wife Zelda, and the affair that happened there on from both him and from Zelda. And then I would ask the obvious question, why am I picking this kind of circumstantial story that just happened to be around and the whole world knew about it over something so personal as this specifically affecting his own life?
Yeah, summed it up perfectly.
Yeah, it took me a while to get there, but I got there.
You got there.
I took a touring car.
Went around Lover's Lane a bit, finally parked on Easton Avenue, and he saw a pig woman on a mule.
I wish there was a photo of her so badly.
We reread Gatsby, and all of a sudden it's talking about a woman on a mule. The mule's name's Jenny.
Oh my god!
We're like, how did we miss this?
I would take it all back if Jenny was in the story.
So I'm with you. I think that fine. They followed the case. There's proof of it. They had scrapbooks apparently. Fitzgerald never outright said, "Yeah, I was inspired by it." I don't know. It's just so weird that it's so definitively marked as being the inspiration behind these certain characters and the major plot line in the book, and people literally write books and papers and essays and everything on it. You have literary scholars who come out like, yes, it was. And it's like, he probably, maybe in the recesses of his mind, there was inspiration because they did follow it. They were in the area. It was so scandalous. It was like sensational. So it'd be probably a little bit like, but I don't think that it's the reason like that he wrote about half the things he did in Gatsby.
No, it was about so much more too. Like I'm really having a hard time with that one. I think it's so easy for, you know, literary critics and everything to fall into that trap just on the merit that it's a good story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Especially nowadays that it's considered a good story. But when it came out, people were like, this is trash.
Oh, no, I meant that it's a good story that Gatsby is based on this. So I think like that is a good story that they just liked.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but like the reality was so much more boring. What's my thesis
gonna be? I guess it'll be about Gatsby and the Hall Mills murder. Okay, that's my thesis. Let's do it.
Yeah, how fun would that be, right? Like you happen to find out that this was happening in the same town and it was a big story and you just draw the parallel because you can.
Exactly. It's fun to speculate about it. It is interesting. It was such a sensational story and it was such a glamorous book. So like, fine, let's draw parallels. And like I said, the only ones I can really draw without like nitpicking are just like the status, the affairs, and everything like that. But like, you know what? At the end of the day, Gatsby is a timeless novel, and F. Scott Fitzgerald is one of the greats. So let's not focus on what he was inspired by, but instead appreciate like what he gave us.
Yeah.
And as Zelda once said of her husband, he was the keynote and prophet of his generation and deserves remembrance as such.
All right. You got it. You got it, Zelda.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning into the conclusion episode of the Hall Mills murder. If you like the show, please rate, review, subscribe, follow, all of that jazz. Be sure to visit our website, darkadaptationpodcast.ca, where you can further support the show by buying us a coffee if your little heart's desire. Follow us on Instagram at Dark Adaptation Podcast. Share the show with the spooky bitches in your life. Thank you for the support and kind words.
And all that jazz.
Thank you for joining us, Dyson.
You're welcome.
We'll catch you on the dark side.
Bye.
Later testified that she didn't even wear that coat on the night of the matters.
I was going to say like
but it made it gave it better.